Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leslie McDaniel, and I'm the Community Resource Advocate for Susan G. Komen, Orange County. For the past 4 years, with the incredible support of local churches, faith-based organizations, civic organizations, businesses, I've been able to lead the African American Health Equity Initiative, also known as the Circle of Promise. I want to sincerely thank you for joining us tonight on this, our third annual Juneteenth program, as we recognize and commemorate Juneteenth. This would not be possible without the ongoing support of our community partners, which are too numerous to mention. However, I would like to take a moment and thank Dr. Veronica Jones of City of Hope in Duarte, Tustin Mayor Pro Tem Letitia Clark, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Orange County Chapter, the Orange County Heritage Council, the Anaheim Packing House, and Georgia's Soul Food Restaurant for their continued support of this and various other programs that the Circle of Promise does to promote health and education in our community. Juneteenth symbolizes freedom. It celebrates the abolishment of slavery and reminds all Americans of the significant contributions of African Americans and Blacks in our society. It is a tribute to those who fought and continue to fight long and hard to make the dream of equality and equity a reality. It is a time for assessment, education, and self-improvement. So tonight, in the company of members of the Circle of Promise Partnership, comprised of Komen Orange County ambassadors, survivors, thrivers, advocates, and volunteers, we are honored to host this important discussion on racism, recognizing that racism is a public health issue, and breast health. And we hope it provides information and education and causes reflection and a greater appreciation of the African American experience. So at this time, I would like to introduce the CEO of Susan G. Komen, Orange County, Megan Klink. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening on this historic day. Susan G. Komen has long recognized that systemic racism has an impact on many aspects of our lives, and healthcare is no exception. When there is a health disparity in a specific population, that means that a specific group of people have a higher overall rate of unwanted health conditions and outcomes. In the case of breast cancer, despite similar rates of diagnosis, Black women suffer a 40% higher mortality rate when compared to white women, and have higher odds of being diagnosed with breast cancer at advanced stages. This is unacceptable. And this is what our incredible team behind the Circle of Promise initiative has endeavored to fight against for the last 11 years. This team is led by Komen OC staffer, the remarkable Leslie McDaniel, who you just met, Komen Orange County board member, Dr. Devera Hurd, who you'll meet soon, and many other incredibly dedicated and passionate community volunteers who have done so much for this organization and for our mission. And I just want to take a moment. We can't see any of you, but all of the incredible Circle of Promise members from wherever you're tuning in tonight, just know that on behalf of the entire organization, we are so grateful and appreciative for everything that you have done for this work. And to Dr. Jones and Ms. Clark, thank you so much for partnering with us in the Circle of Promise initiative and leading us all in what I know will be a powerful and meaningful dialogue this evening. And with that, I would now like to introduce Komen Orange County board member, Dr. Devera Hurd.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Devera Hurd, and I do indeed sit on the board of Susan G. Komen, Orange County. It's my pleasure this evening to bring you information about our observance of Juneteenth 2020. We find ourselves in another era needing emancipation concerning racism and inequality that mirrors that which occurred during the US Civil War 155 years ago and the Civil Rights Act in 1964, 56 years ago. So we will spend about 8 to 9 minutes tonight talking about Juneteenth or Emancipation Day to set a foundation for you to think about it and act upon it. The Constitution of the United States of America stated that all men were created equal, but that was not truly the behavior of the still young country called the United States of America concerning slaves, women, Native Americans, and other immigrants. Many people found fault with the fact there were people in the United States who were enslaved and treated very poorly. People of all races worked together quietly to remove slaves from their hard way of life, but it was not making a dent in the millions of lives that were owned by white masters and had no jurisdiction over their own lives. When Abraham Lincoln became the president in 1861, his goal was to bring the nation together economically and stop the enslavement of Black people, who were forcibly brought to America to build a nation which did not recognize them as a part of that nation, but equated them to owned livestock. In February 1861, 7 Southern states seceded from the United States Union: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas. Their reason was that they were not interested in changing the status quo of slave ownership. After the Civil War began, 4 additional states also seceded: Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. This was called the Confederacy. There were many debates and discussions about changing the policy of enslavement. Then, on April 12th, in 1861, the assault on Fort Sumter began the Civil War. It lasted 4 years and 27 days until May 9th, 1865. It is thought that about 620,000 people died from injury or illness because of this war, which is the most deaths during any of the wars U.S. has participated in to date. Those who died were Black, white, and other nationalities. President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd, 1864, stating that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states were to be freed and remain free henceforth. There was a stipulation, however, that this was only to take place if the Union won the war and if the rebellious states did not stop their protest. Well, the states did not stop their rebellion or their protests. The war was not over, but the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect January 1st, 1863. However, because of how news moved around the country during that time, there were many slaves that did not know of their newfound freedom. It was not until the Union Army rode into Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865, that the slaves in Texas learned of their freedom. Surprised, elated, thrilled, thankful only partially describes the mood of the people hearing the news. They held celebrations with dance, food, games, and of course, prayer. June 19th became known as Juneteenth, or Emancipation Day in Texas. Not until Texas State Representative Al Edwards, who recently passed at 83, put forth a bill to make the day an official holiday in Texas in 1980, did Juneteenth become the annual official holiday. Not only in Texas, but 46 of the other 50 states also recognize Emancipation Day, that changed the lives and the way of thinking about slavery in the US. But please remember that the Emancipation Proclamation did not set the law of the land. Not until the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution were voted on and implemented did the laws stating equal rights become the national focus of America, which was a nation founded on not living under the rule of one person known as a king, or a dictator. It is important that all of those residing in America continue to focus on what is best for all people. Today, we will focus on what is best for women in this time of COVID-19 pandemic, social unrest, and continued focus on breast health. We're now going to have the first stanza of Lift Every Voice and Sing, or as most of us have come to know it, the Negro National Anthem or the Black National Anthem. This song was written, as you know, by James Weldon Johnson as a poem in 1900 for Booker T. Washington honoring Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and then was put to music by John Rosamond Johnson in 1908. It was an opportunity for Blacks to showcase their hope and inner pride during a time when blatant racism, Jim Crow laws, segregation, and lynchings were often occurring. Please enjoy the program we have prepared for you this next hour and stay informed as you prepare to vote for laws that will support all people, regardless of gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and nationality. Thank you for joining us today for Susan G. Komen Circle of Promises recognition of Juneteenth 2020. Let's hear Latrice Lawrence sing the first stanza of the Black National Anthem.
Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. The rising sun has this day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you so much, Latrice, for that powerful rendition of the anthem. And at this time, we're going to begin tonight's discussion. Let me introduce Dr. Veronica Jones of City of Hope in Duarte and Tustin Mayor Pro Tem Letitia Clark. Ladies, would you join me at this time? And while they're joining, I'd like to read their brief bios. Specializing in breast cancer surgery, the much honored Dr. Veronica Jones joined City of Hope in 2015 after serving as an assistant professor of surgery at Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta. Dr. Jones graduated with honors from Stanford University and received her medical degree from Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. She completed her internship and residency at Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas. She also studied HIV, AIDS, and reproductive health during a clerkship in Kenya. Along the way, she picked up a variety of awards from Chief Resident of the Year to Best Surgical Oncology Paper. Dr. Jones writes extensively and has focused her research on health disparities in underserved populations, as well as new technologies in breast cancer care. Tustin Mayor Pro Tem Letitia Clark was elected to the City Council in 2016. She's a third-generation Orange County native and graduate of Tustin High School. Her priorities while on the City Council are communication, economic development, investment in innovation, public health, and support of local education. Mayor Pro Tem represents the city of Tustin as a board member on the Orange County Fire Authority and the Orange County Library Board. The City Selection Committee appointed her to the Emergency Medical Care Committee in 2017. Mayor Pro Tem Clark served as board member on the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District for 2 years. She's also an advisory board member to the Community Health Initiative of Orange County and Clinic in the Park. Mayor Pro Tem Clark is an award-winning public affairs professional with several years of experience in the public and nonprofit sectors. She currently serves as the District Director of Public Affairs and Governmental Relations for the South Orange County Community College District. And in this role, she promotes educational opportunities and the academic success of nearly 60,000 students. She is the first African-American woman to serve on the Tustin City Council. Ladies, welcome tonight.
Thank you.
It's an honor to be in your presence. I'm just thrilled that you both took the time to be here tonight and really looking forward to hearing the discussion and the dialogue between you two. So at this time, with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem, who's going to serve as both moderator and participant in this discussion. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Laura Leslie. Welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all today, especially on this day, on Juneteenth. As we see the nation really pay attention to this holiday that the Black community has been celebrating for a long time, but it's great to see that there's so much attention drawn to it and the significance that it has in our community. So it's great to be with you on this day to celebrate and have this important conversation. I will be serving as your moderator today. So my first marching orders is to ask Dr. Jones a couple questions before the discussion started. And Dr. Jones, I've had the pleasure of hearing you a couple times speak with this group in particular, just about all of the amazing things you're doing and building awareness specifically for women of color to take care of our health and focus on breast health as well. So before we get into the discussion, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? Why did you decide to become a breast surgeon? Of all things that you could have endeavored, why breast surgeon?
Yeah. So thank you for having me. I want to say welcome to everybody tuning in. It's really an honor to be here, able to speak to you today. So getting to your question, I grew up in Los Angeles, and so I'm a native of Southern California. And honestly, I've always had a desire to go into medicine. But my grandmother actually passed away from liver cancer when I was 12. And after that, I kind of told people that I was going to cure cancer. And that stuck with me. When I went to Stanford, I decided, though, to study the medical anthropology, which is the study of how different cultures interpret medicine. And the reason I chose that was, even though I witnessed my grandmother going through liver cancer, what struck me the most was the suffering of my mom and how illness affects families and it affects communities. And it's more than just the patient, it's everyone who loves them and surrounds them. And so I focused on anthropology at Stanford and dove headlong into medicine and race and gender and how these intersect. And I wanted to understand how different communities interpret disease, because you can't just treat every person the same. And you need to understand the perspective that a patient brings, because that's the lens through which they're going to interpret everything you tell them. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I had to decide, do I want to make my career focused on public health and communities, or am I called to be that bridge between the Black community and the medical profession? And ultimately, I felt called to enter the medical profession and attempt to be that bridge. At Meharry, I fell in love with surgery. I just love surgery. I love taking care of women. I love female health and empowering women to be advocates for themselves. And so breast surgery was just a natural fit for me.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. I think several things that you just touched on that personally drew you to this field is going to help frame some of the other points in our conversation this evening. So that's perfect. And kind of a segue into looking at race and culture and how that relates to health. It's very interesting that you had the perspective that you wanted to reach people through the lens that they see how to address their health, that every culture is different, every community is different, and they address health and look at health in different ways. So given that, just even talking about how it's just different to experience your health journey as different cultures and races, you being an African-American woman, in what we probably most of us know as a white male dominated field, how have you navigated through your career? What are some things that you've seen as either barriers or advantages in being a Black woman? And yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about your experience as being a young woman as well.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
For adding that in there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. And I know that everyone tuning in has their journey, right? I mean, and this is the same song, different chorus of being judged first by what you look like rather than the knowledge that you have or the compassion that you have for someone. And so that is my story as well. Going to Stanford, even though Stanford has a sizable Black population, I didn't feel like I belonged exactly. And I ran to an HBCU when it came time for graduate school. I needed that sense of acceptance and belonging at some point in my career, right? Because I got out of Meharry and I started my residency in Dallas, where I was the only Black person in the department. And the second only Black person to ever be in the department, and the first Black female ever to be in the department. And that was hard. You know, people, as you all know, judge you before they get to know you. And I think the hardest obstacle that I had to overcome was that sometimes I believed them. You know, I believed that I didn't belong as much because that was the message I was receiving. And I had to overcome that by God's grace, believing that I am worthy, even though the message sent to me was that I wasn't as worthy. And it's a struggle, right? It's something that I have to constantly remind myself as I enter, you know, different rooms, being the Black female standing out, as I'm sure many people on this call have experienced.
Well, I can relate personally as well. Grew up here in Orange County, often very familiar with being the only Black student in a class, if not very few. Learning about my dad and my grandparents' experience living here, my dad growing up here, you know, very similar experiences. Like you, I ran to an HBCU upon graduation from high school. I attended Xavier University in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I read something online the other day that that it was talking about the HBCU experience and why other folks always wonder why we run to our homecomings or why we're always representing so hard for our HBCU. And for a lot of Black students that attend HBCUs, it's the consecutive 4 years or consecutive 3 years that we are around Black excellence, that we are held to higher expectations, that we are told you have every ounce of potential in the world, you can succeed. Don't let your race stop you from doing amazing things, which we don't always receive those messages in the world. And if you're not careful, that can, you know, live within, and you can start believing those things and not have those positive affirmations that you often get in the Black community or from like historically Black colleges and universities. So I share that experience with you. Similar, I know Leslie just wanted me to talk really quickly about being the first African-American woman on the Tustin City Council. I'm not the first African-American person. We had a Black mayor, Al Murray, for several years and served on the council. He's served an 8-year term, which we're very proud of in Tustin. And the first thing people always ask me when they find out I'm elected in Tustin, they're like, well, what's the Black population in Tustin? Assuming it's some great population, and it isn't. We're probably about between 3 and 4%, which is a little higher than the county average, which is a little less than 2% right now. But here, I think what I found out in running was that my race was not a huge factor. It was what I was bringing to the table. It was what I represented through my vote, what I wanted to see in policy, that I cared about this city, that I, went to school here and shared some of the values and what I thought should be invested in the city. That's what helped me get elected. And it didn't matter for most people what I looked like or what race I was. So that should be encouraging, I think, to our community.
That's awesome.
That in Orange County, there are still many opportunities. We just kind of have to push through that negative narrative that a lot may be experiencing and, fight to have a seat at the table, because our voice is crucial. And we're seeing that especially during times like these. Laura Leslie, maybe you can help us frame the rest of the conversation, but I know I wanted to talk about some of the things that connect these two crises right now that we're dealing with, the pandemic and looking at racial tension at an all-time high, civic unrest occurring. I know about some terms with my work during when I worked for the American Academy of Pediatrics: social determinants to health, toxic stress. Can we talk about some of those things as it relates to the Black community or communities of color, and how social determinants to health or toxic stress directly relate to our culture and where we live in the community sometimes, and how that relates to health? Could you touch on that a little bit, Dr. Jones?
Right. It is all connected. I love that you brought that up. And, I think that COVID-19 has just highlighted how social determinants of health negatively and disproportionately impact Black communities in terms of their health outcomes, because the Black community is more susceptible to COVID-19 and the outcomes are worse from COVID-19 in the Black population. And it's because of these social determinants of health, which is really a big catch-all term to just mean your environment, everything that you're living in, right? What you eat, the access that you have to physical activity, the pollution, the air traffic, the noise traffic that you are constantly subjected to, the stress of the neighborhood that you live in. All of those things fall under the umbrella of social determinants of health. And they impact outcomes even from when you're in the womb. These things, you are programmed to be more susceptible if you were exposed to these negative social determinants of health, to be sicker, to not be able to get over certain diseases as easily. And thankfully, a lot of research is going into understanding social determinants of health, implementing change to make sure that we are addressing these needs in different communities to affect health outcomes. So a lot is being done surrounding that, because only recently people are recognizing how everything is so connected. It's not just poor choices or, or genetics. It's everything. Everything's related. And so we have to understand the context people are coming, into a disease with, and we need to take those into consideration when they're treating them.
Right.
We are treating them.
I feel like midway between the stay-at-home orders, like maybe around April, we started hearing that there were these disparities in health and that Black and Brown people were being adversely affected by COVID-19. But then the conversation kind of died and we moved on to the next thing, until the death of George Floyd started bringing back up, these issues around race. Now I feel like we're talking about them again, and really having forums like this where we're having some difficult conversations about systemic racism, about the long-term impacts of racism and how it impacts every kind of institution in our lives, right? Healthcare, education, et cetera. What did you hear, just as being a part of the medical community? Were there any movements taking place when the nation started to talk about these disparities in health related to the pandemic? Did you see some movement or some conversations happening then? And if not, do you see them happening now or being revitalized now?
Absolutely. I did see them, but even in the medical field, disparities was not at the forefront of the discussion initially, right? When COVID first hit and all the changes were being made in society, we were playing catch up, right? We were trying to figure out, okay, how do we just navigate life right now? And a lot of people were not paying attention to the disparities that were occurring until, like you said, about April, the medical community woke up too and said, this is no different, right? This is no different than the disparities that we see in cancer or diabetes or heart disease. And we're seeing it here in COVID as well. And I saw a big push in April in terms of devoting, first capturing the disparities, right? Taking note of patients' self-reported race or ethnicity when they were coming in diagnosed. So that was the first step. And a lot of states, I will say, ramped up very quickly in terms of their reporting ability, capturing race. And then from there, research started to go into, okay, well, what's the mechanism behind the disparity? And so it actually, I didn't see it go away in the medical field, which is encouraging.
Absolutely.
Even though maybe the media wasn't covering it as much leading into May, the medical field didn't forget. And so the research was still going on.
Yeah, that is encouraging to know. I see a question here in the chat, but I did want to ask you just to touch on how you got connected to Komen Orange County, and particularly, I've heard you speak on why Black women need to be very aggressive in paying attention to their breast health. Can you kind of just point out why specifically it's an important call to action for Black women?
Sure. Yeah. I love Komen OC. And Laura Leslie contacted me, I think it was several years ago now. And I just love working with this organization, of everything they stand for. And they invited me to speak about Black women and breast cancer because there is such a disparity in breast cancer, right? Black women die at a much higher rate. The mortality rate's 40% higher than Black women. And that's why I devote my research to looking at that disparity. In my research, I look at how genes affect the disparity between Black women and white women with breast cancer. It is very important for Black women to take charge of their health, know the risk factors for breast cancer, know what they personally have that makes them at risk. And especially in light of this COVID situation, that is essential, right? In March, April, things shut down. In the breast cancer community or the medical field, we were not allowed to do elective procedures. You were not allowed to do your screening. And we needed to empower patients to know when you had to come to the hospital and when you didn't have to come to the hospital. And I encourage all people on the call, all women especially, to know your individual risk factors for breast cancer, because that will affect whether or not you should get your screening now or whether you should wait until the COVID curve kind of comes down a little bit more. You are not really able to get screening mammograms right now. You can get diagnostic mammograms which are mammograms specifically looking at something in particular, right? Those are the mammograms where they're focused and maybe you've had something in the past, like cancer in the past, and it's your follow-up mammogram. Those we are doing. For patients, for people who have never had breast cancer, we're delaying screening mammograms, especially if you have comorbidities that put you at risk for COVID. So you really have to know your health history in totality. Do you have asthma? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have diabetes? Do you have a family history of breast cancer? Do you have a personal history of breast cancer? Because when you take all those factors into consideration, it will help guide you as to whether or not you can go to the hospital at this time. If you have no risk factors for breast cancer, maybe wait a little bit until the COVID curve comes down. So it's just very important to know your history right now.
I think that helped answer a couple questions that came in. I see that there's some anxiety regarding breast health screenings and or treatment, and a question just about how have procedures changed as a result of COVID-19, what should be expected. So it seems like you kind of outlined that as well. If someone, I mean, maybe you could go over how important it is to do self-examinations, and if someone does find something, is that going to be cause to go in and get checked even during COVID-19?
Yes. So just as a quick review, breast cancer symptoms, most common one is a mass or a lump, a ball that you feel in your breast. If you feel that, absolutely, you should go in to be checked. Even with COVID going on in the nation, that is something that you should get looked at. In terms of where to go from there, different hospitals have different procedures. I can say at City of Hope, before any invasive procedure is done, you are tested for COVID. So before you have a biopsy or some kind of invasive procedure, that's not at every hospital. So I've had some patients who were really reluctant to come in because they did not want to be tested for COVID. Not every hospital has that guideline. I think that it's important to have a relationship with a doctor, call somebody, and see what facility you feel most comfortable going to, because every facility has different protocols. But definitely lump, change in the breast size, change in the color, change in the nipple. If you notice any of those things, don't wait for COVID to be over. Go to the hospital or the clinic or your physician and get checked out for that. Those are more emergency.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. Another question: do all breast cancers ultimately metastasize?
No, they don't, which is great.
Yeah.
The problem is you can't tell which ones those are going to be. So I can't predict that. If I see a patient, I can't say that you're fine, you don't need to be treated, this will never go anywhere. Even for the cancers that we call non-invasive or stage 0 ones, that at that time, they are not able to spread to other parts of the body, which is what metastasize means. They're not able to spread to another part of the body, but they could in the future. So it's really hard as clinicians to tell which cancers will never metastasize and which ones will. If you are diagnosed with cancer, we have a lot of tools that we use to help us predict whether or not that will happen. So we can give you a probability or a chance, but we know in part, right? We don't know.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think that's helpful. Just no guarantees. You have to be in touch with your primary care doctor or the doctor that you're seeing. Another question: what age should you start checking your breasts?
So you should check around age 18, I would say, is the first time. Your breasts will change throughout your life. When you're 18, they will be very different than when you are 30, and when you are 60, than when you are 90. And so you just want to know what's normal for you. I tell women, my patients, women that I meet all the time, don't be afraid of checking your breasts. You just need to know what's your normal, know your normal, and own that. And that way you'll know if something's different, but you should start around that time. Your breasts are still changing at that time, but you can practice.
Perfect. Looks like we have another question. What medical groups have you considered? Oh, okay. I guess every medical group is different in terms of calling and making appointments.
Yes.
Do you have any recommendations about what folks should do during this time?
It's hard. I will be very honest for the medical community right now and say that we are doing the best we can to figure out how to navigate this crisis. And not everyone is doing it the same way.
Right.
that's why I said, call around to different facilities, ask your doctor which facilities are doing which things, because some places don't have as many resources as others, right? Some places can't do COVID testing for every patient that comes into the hospital, and some can. And so everybody's practice is different, depending on the resources that they have. And so that's why I encourage everyone to know their own history and be empowered in that way. So you can advocate for yourself either way.
Right. Regarding screening, I know screening is a good first step for many people. Does City of Hope, are they a screening facility? Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, City of Hope is not a screening facility at this time, and it's just because we're a cancer hospital. So a lot of our patients come in having an abnormal mammogram or an abnormal finding, or even having a cancer diagnosis already. Most patients come in with their films though, and I'm able to see the films the same day that I see the patient. Okay.
A question from Joan. She asked, do you find Black women engage more in clinical trials in 2020? Is that on the rise, Black women participating in clinical trials?
It is on the rise.
Oh,
so
good.
that is on the national agenda for the NIH, is to increase participation of Black people and Black women in clinical trials. And so there's this push to engage more participants. We need more diversity in our clinical trials. Absolutely. We cannot continue to make drugs for one population. And so that has been recognized by the NIH. And so that is a push.
Great. Kind of thinking about some calls to action moving forward. I know DeVera Hurd touched on voting and getting involved in policy. Coming from a medical field perspective, is there anything that you can see us advocating for at the local, state, or federal level? And then maybe just touch on, from your perspective, how important it is for us to be cognizant of people influencing policies, even when we're talking about social determinants to health, to ensure what our communities look like so that we can be healthier. But are there things that we can be doing, everyone on this call, to not only advocate for ourselves, but for healthier communities, or certain pieces of legislation that you're aware of that can help you in your work?
Yeah, communities have a lot of power, and I think that the bond between a community and the hospital or the clinic that serves it could be stronger. I would love to see that connection deepen. And I think that where we can start is all engaging in making ourselves aware of, what hospitals in our area, what clinical trials are going on at that place. And usually they have an outreach body, like an organization in the hospital that its sole purpose is to connect to the community. I will tell you that in order for a trial, like a research trial, to happen, the institution or the hospital has to have a connection to the community. Okay. It's written in the trial. And so they are looking for people to help them bridge that gap between the hospital and the community. And so look at the clinical trials, talk to the person. Usually there's someone, the name listed, contact them, see how you can help kind of engage the community. I think that would be the easiest, just right in your neighborhood thing that you can do in order to just learn more about how to be involved. In terms of going higher up in legislation, it's a chaotic year, right? I mean, there's a lot on the agenda. There has to be better access for different communities to healthy behaviors, right? As we talk about these social determinants of health, one big thing is food deserts, right? Which is where you don't have access to healthy food or supermarkets. fighting, your local legislation or state to get those resources for your community will make everyone healthier. I think that you can address the social determinants of health, like access, like safe neighborhoods to walk in, right? I mean, just access to greenery. You can work with your local government to try to get those things also. I don't know if that's low-hanging fruit. You can tell me if that's low-hanging fruit or not, but it would do so much for your overall health.
No, you're right. In some ways, it is low-hanging fruit, and just things that we kind of, I always say some of the things that we can do that we have the most power in aren't always sexy. That they're vital. Right. They're not Instagrammable. They're not something that feels like you're making a huge difference, but really just making sure that your voice is heard. And I'd be remiss if I didn't make a plug for the census right now. Just being counted. It takes 10 minutes to be counted. It seems like something that's not necessary, but when the census comes into play, we're able to see who's in our community. We're able to then assess resources and our allocated resources, each community, based on who is in your community. So if it's demonstrated that you have a large number of minorities or a large number of seniors in your community, you can advocate for resources specifically to address that population. But if we don't know that those people exist or live in our community, then we, number one, don't get the funding, and number two, can't allocate them appropriately. So that's another low-hanging fruit that people can participate in. But yeah, I think just being engaged is key. We have a federally qualified health clinic here in Tustin, one, and they're very holistic. They offer nutrition services, mental health services. They offer cooking classes to show you how to cook healthier. So they understand that this is not just coming to the doctor, we treat you, and then you're on your own. This really is, we have to show you how to access good and fresh and healthy food, and then show you how to cook it, and then show you how to exercise when you have no parks near you. That it's crucial for us to touch on every part of healthy lifestyle.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Mm-hmm. I just want to piggyback off of that really quickly, that engaging is, like you said, key, because usually those institutions need to prove engagement to get more funding. And so I just wanted to say yes. Yes, I agree.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions from Facebook or YouTube, but I think just to kind of bring everything full circle is that we're talking about an Emancipation Celebration Day, being freed from slavery, 1865. But then when we think about our modern day slavery, what could really be holding us back from achieving in our communities, for our families, and that can be health. We can be slaves to our health if we're not careful. So I think today you heard from Dr. Jones, everyone, talk about how you need to take control of your health, be an advocate for yourself, understand what resources you have available, and then other calls to action are advocating for increased access and making sure that you,
how you doing, man? I'm Jay.
Have resources available to you to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And all of that is going to play a part in the quality of life that we're living, in addition to all the barriers that we already have to experience. We don't want health to be one of those. But we know that as Black people and the society that we're living in now, it's already a challenge. So we have to do our part to ensure that health is not yet another barrier and challenge for us. But we thank you for being on the front lines, for all that you've done. Thank you. I've heard this was kind of a brainchild of yours to bring this discussion together. Thank you.
I was just, as everyone just wrecked the past month, and so wanted to be able to serve in my space, breast cancer, do whatever I can to just make people understand that we see you. And we hear you, and we're in this together, and we're everywhere in this together. So,
thank you. Laura Leslie, do you want to close us out, or let us know what we can do next?
Sure. First of all, I just wanted to thank you both. That was absolutely incredible. I wanted to just curl up on the couch and listen and just be engaged and not have to come back. But I can't thank you enough, Dr. Jones and Letitia Clark. You're both amazing women. And it's just an honor to have you both on our program today. And I really, really thank you for your continued support, because you're not just with us today, but both of you are with us throughout the year, helping with programming, with educating, and making sure the community receives, very necessary information. So I thank you both for your support. You're wonderful. And at this time, you two ladies can go off screen, and we're going to bring on our closing inspiration. Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce Jay Boykin. As you all can probably see, he's currently at a concert, but he's going to stop and give us a special performance to close us out today. And I really, truly, truly appreciate it. Let me read a little bit about him. Let's see. Millennial saxophonist Jay Boykin, who I've known for many, many years. He's been playing probably half or more of his life. He's still a young man, but I know he started playing quite young. He's affectionately known as the sax sensation. He's played with and opened for Frankie Beverly and Mays and Letitia and John Legend and Boney James and Gerald Albright, and several others, and appeared on television shows and videos. And we're just honored to have him with us here today. Jay, welcome. Can you hear us?
How y'all doing?
How you doing? We're so excited to have you with us. Take it away, Jay.
Love y'all. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna start this real set now.
That was
You know what I'm saying? That
awesome.
was
Thank
like,
you, Jay.
that was a little
Jay, he's in the
Zoom
middle of a concert.
performance
Let's
for
see. I need him to turn his
my name is Jay Boykin. Now we're gonna have some fun right now.
let's see. He's still
DJ,
on.
hit me.
Uh-oh, we're gonna get more of his concert, I guess.
What do you have to lose?
I'm gonna end now and just say everyone have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining. Good night. Thank you.